for our first of many Lunch and Learn Brown Bags virtual vodcast. It's going to be cool. It's everything and nothing all at the same time. This is brought to you by Anvil Media, an agency in Portland that is older than most of its employees. So we're going to talk today with a very special guest, Mike Chase. It's actually spelled Michael with a K, no C. I assume he's from Serbia or something. We'll figure that out later. But Mike Chase is a lot of things. He's a triple threat. He's on-air radio talent for most of his career. He's currently a video marketing expert. He's a competitive tennis player, which I didn't know until recently. And then also he's been a co-host of mine on a podcast. He's done some acting. He's been in Portlandia and some other timely shows. Remembered Portlandia, everybody? It made and broke Portland all at the same time. Mike, I'm going to hand it to you to give everybody a little background. We originally met when I moved to Portland in 1995, and there was this new radio station that had launched called NRK, and there was this new morning talent guy, Mike Chase, and it wasn't Daria first, was it? It was you and
Stephanie.
Stephanie, yeah.
Right.
And I started faxing him ideas for his radio show. I have no idea why. As an intern, basically, at a PR agency, and for some reason he would talk back to me. Started with faxing, really informal relationship, and then it went from there. But Mike, why don't you give us a little background on your amazing journey?
Okay, thanks, Ken, and I really appreciate being here. Thanks for taking the time to come in, everybody. I'll try to be as brief as I can in my answers and try to bring it into the 21st century if I can. I mean, we're talking about faxing and radio here. So the idea, I guess, for me to be here is to maybe talk about from a unique perspective from then to now, just how I might believe that radio has dropped the ball, and it has momentously several times, and I'll get to that in a second, but also how it's kind of undergirded the way people use media now in ways that you may not realize, especially when it comes to digital media. And I'll even underscore that as well. But yeah, just been doing morning radio for a long time, been doing a lot of acting, and then I kind of took a look at like the radio model, and this is one of the ways that it kind of informs the digital space right now in terms of what you guys do, is that each morning it was tabula rasa. It was like a blank slate every morning, and our job was to come up with content that a listener could adhere to and go, oh, that was good, I want to listen to these guys again, or I'm going to make this a habit, or I'm going to become a fanatic, not just a user, but a fanatic. And that's kind of what the charge of the morning show was for so long, for so many years, was to reach out through the radio, through stunts, promotions, content, conversation, interviews, just unique features, consistency, structure. How was that deployed every morning? At what time was it deployed? I'll explain how, if you don't know how radio is rated, it's ridiculous. It's actually quite amusing, and we'll all laugh together. But when social media became what it is now, in those beginning years, I kind of took a look at the landscape and thought, geez, every business in the world needs to now be doing what morning radio has been doing for decades, which is to connect beyond just the transactional, like not just, hey, this is half off, come in now, 3-day sale, whatever. We need to create like an actual marketing relationship through our culture and our humor, our values, as we appeal to not only the current generation, but whatever generation is coming along next. And how can we keep that conversation going through the generations to grow our business and stay in business? And so I started getting into video, and it was really fortunate because, as you know, like certainly with the music industry, you're seeing the means of production have certainly shifted to guys like us, people like us. We don't have to be beholden to like huge studio costs or huge production costs or soundstage costs or camera costs or equipment costs. Pretty soon these phones, like that iPhone that came out this week, the 13, it's amazing. I mean, it's going to be at least as good as anything below a red, the red camera, and in certain spaces even better. So with the means of production here, it really comes down to the idea. It comes down to content. And that's what I found. I thought, well, if I can start getting into conversations with businesses that would like me to do for them what I've been doing on the radio all these years, we can start developing video dialogues and video content and assets that can be used across different platforms, can be used in blogs, repurposed in blogs year to year, capitalize on whatever parade's going on. One of the things in radio is like, if there's a parade, you want to be in front of it, whether it's your business or your radio show. So those are some of the ways in which what I have been doing have lended themselves pretty well to what I do now with businesses and my clients through Milepost Media.
That pregnant pause was on purpose. I have chicken fingers and I couldn't hit my mute button. That's part of what you get.
Is this discussion about your lunch or about what?
Yeah, it's about my lunch and how it's evolved through social media because I'm taking pictures of it on TikTok.
Before you had to go pick it up, but now Grubhub brings it to you because of the digital landscape that we have.
It's all about the digital.
Right.
But I do want to ask you, Mike, playing off what you're saying, you came from radio, you've evolved to video. We've co-hosted a podcast for closers. We gave that a try, did a season's worth, and we had too many listeners, so we had to stop. But one thing I want to say is you had a really poignant set of observations about how radio is very different than podcasting. Yeah. And if you could recap for those, there are only probably a few people that haven't listened to our podcast that are listening now to this recording. So tell us a little bit about those fundamental differences between radio as you know it and we know it, podcasting. And then for bonus points, if you want to sprinkle in a little bit of the social audio phenom and give us your thoughts on that, that could be a follow-up if you prefer. But talk to us about radio versus podcasting, because most people don't know the difference. And I didn't think there was really much of a difference.
No, I think there is. Yeah, I think there's audio, and I think that radio is audio, but radio and podcasting are both audio, but that doesn't mean they're the same thing. And I think that the way that they're different is if you go back to like the way modern radio was established, it was basically a guy named Lee Abrams who was driving in his car. He was a consultant back in the 60s, and he noticed that the car next to him, when the song was ending at a red light and the DJ started talking or the commercial came on, the volume went down. And so at that moment, he decided that people were listening to the radio for the music and that anything else was an irritant. And I think that later evolved to become something more like your brain is kind of split into two parts, which is that you're listening to the music, you're hearing another song, and then suddenly somebody comes on and starts talking. And that takes you out of one mode of experience, which is listening to music, and puts you into another, which is listening to talk. And those are kind of two different areas of the brain that radio has always been asking us to coordinate and sort of cohabitate peacefully. And so his observation was that they really don't. And so the less that the DJ talked, or the fewer commercials there were, and the more music there was, then that was going to be the big winner for whatever radio station he was consulting or programming. And so that was the thinking for a long time, and they also had to play to the methodology. How is radio being rated, and how do those cost per thousands get sold to agencies and even directly in the local market? And they broke it down into quarter hours, and this is the way radio is rated. So to this day, Nielsen has a panel of people, about 2,000 people strong, not all of them in tab based on whether they're moving or whether they're out of town. There's all kinds of different variations, but they basically carry a little pager called the personal people meter. And each radio station has a unique code, which is silent to us, but the personal people meter picks it up. And so these people on this panel are expected to carry this little pager around with their phone, with their keys, with all the other stuff they have to do. And the idea is that as they move through their day, whatever radio station they're going to be exposed to, that little personal people meter will record that unique code and then download the data for Nielsen to then transcribe into a percentage of listening. And it's supposed to measure exposure. You were exposed to this station for this long, blah, blah, blah. So radio stations have forever been playing to the quarter hour, because they take the hour and then they break it into quarters. And so from the top of the hour to 15 past, any 5 minutes of continuous listening that you get within that quarter hour, you get credit for the whole quarter hour. And it's all about quarter hours. That's the currency. And if the way they program the station is they want to do a sweep. They want to sweep past 15 past the hour, the bottom of the hour, 45, and the top of the hour. The idea being that if you can get that 5 minutes of listening to cross the quarter hour, now you've got credit for both quarter hours if that 5 minutes hits the right spot. So Howard Stern would always talk about, he would say the most outrageous thing at 14 minutes past the hour so that people would hang on across the sweep. Then he would get you'd get both those quarter hours. And that's how the game's been played for so long. The people meter changes that somewhat, but it's basically a really crazy way to listen and a really crazy way to sell what you do, because the population of people that are going to say yes to carrying around a meter and carrying around a phone and all the things that they have to do in their day. Now we're adding this for, I don't know how much Nielsen pays, but it's not a lot. So then you've got this really small population, which is not really a good extrapolation of the entire population. It's just this certain kind of people that are going to say yes to this. And often it's many people in the same household. So if you've got one person in the household that likes one station and that person is dominant in that household, all those other meters in the same household are going to pick up the same thing that that one person wants. So you're really only measuring one person 3 or 4 times in the household. So it's got its problems. It's pretty crazy. And that's why radio's always had a hard time with attribution and ROI and all that kind of stuff, and why they're switching to impressions, which is ridiculous, but I'll get to that in a second. Anyway, so the way it differs from a podcast, I think, is that because of all the structure and the way you play to the methodology, radio has always been about brevity, 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 and structure, structure, structure. Listen at 7:10, 7:10, 7:20, 7:20. You're setting appointments basically in the way that Starbucks does with their little receipt that they have. When you go in the morning, you get the coffee, the receipt says, come back again this afternoon for another blast of coffee. You get half off if you save this receipt. So they're creating 2 occasions with the same consumer in one day. And I think that's what radio has always been trying to do, because the more occasions you get with a person per day or per week, the better off you're going to be if they happen to be a meter holder. Podcasts don't care about that. Podcasts are more about, as you know, how they're downloaded, how long they're listened, who downloads them. I don't know what kind of demographic data is available from iTunes or from other platforms where people download podcasts, but you never hear people in podcasts talking about playing 10 in a row or listening at 7:20 or structuring it in the same way. They're not beholden to the same strictures that radio is. The methodology doesn't necessarily drive the content on a podcast like it would in radio. And I think podcasts are more in the now, in that, again, the means of production are here with us. And so we can have a conversation about something we love, snacks or Lifetime movies or whatever my particular niche in my podcast is. I'm here with my friend. And as long as we keep it moving, as long as we have endearing personalities, and as long as we talk about something that's relatable and we're consistent with that, it doesn't really matter if we play to the methodology the way radio does. And I think that changes the whole experience for the consumer.
That's a good point. So there's a different mindset with radio versus podcasting. Let's talk a second about social audio, and and that might be live streaming, but just the Clubhouse phenomenon. Is it dead? Is it alive? Is it the first iteration of something amazing? Is it just a distraction? Where are you on this whole social audio?
Well, Clubhouse, I think, came and went. To me, it was a non-starter. The idea of it, I think, is good, but I think that's true with all of social media. I mean, I forgot his name, but the Salesforce CEO, he owns Time. He was talking about how social media has us all in this grip of lies and perceived reality, and there needs to be regulation. And he owns Time magazine, so he's beholden to a certain standard as a reporter of news and information that social media is not. And so when you talk about the idea of social media and the connectivity and the promise that it held for so many years, and then the actual reality and the experience with it, I think is true with Clubhouse and social audio. I mean, how many interesting people are there really out there? And how many interesting people, like most of the podcasts are really quite boring because they don't follow. I was going to say, this is another thing they could take from radio with all the things I said about radio being wrong. Podcasts can take from radio the idea of structure and brevity, structuring it like a term paper, like I'm telling you what the podcast is about up front. I'm telling you who's going to be on. I'm telling you why you should listen. Then I'm going to deliver on that. And then at the end, I'm going to tell you what we just did, how good of a job we did, and how you can get more of it the next time. So those are things radio is good at. And those are things that would be great in a podcast. But when you talk about like these sort of just user-based experiences where somebody comes on and says, hey, it's Clubhouse and we're eavesdropping on conversations and it's supposed to be fascinating. But I mean, if you look at the comments on any post anywhere, the first 3 comments are probably pretty benign and pretty nice. And then by the 4th one, it's like, you should burn in hell. Like it quickly devolves. And it's not about content, it's about conflict usually.
About conflict, I learned something from you that kind of crushed the last bastion of what I enjoyed about morning radio. And that is that, can we talk about this? The prank, the callers calling, the radio station calls your ex-girlfriend for you, and then you get into something, and they were listening in, you didn't know it, like that, all those setups. Tell us about That, and maybe there's one or two secrets you can tell us that are pretty widely known. You won't get, in a ton of trouble for times, but I was shocked when you told me like some of the background, but it makes total sense.
Yeah, I mean, in the old days, if we put a topic out, like, let's think in terms of clickbait online. If you're scrolling through your feed and you see, I don't know, there was that old one, you're doing it wrong. If you're doing it this way, you're doing it wrong. Now you're like, well, what am I doing wrong? And am I doing it? Maybe I'm doing it right. I got to click and see. So any sort of provocative sentence or headline or whatever that got you to click on it is the same thing that radio's been using for many years. They call them teases. Now they call them invites, which is, this is the one thing that your child will love you for forever. We'll tell you more coming up in 10 minutes. And so that's, again, to get them to cross that 15-minute or that half-hour mark so you can get credit for both quarter hours because they want to know what it is. So it is with clickbait, and so it is with, topics on the radio. We used to get people to call all the time. And nobody ever calls a radio station anymore because it's a hassle to call because nobody likes phone calls anymore. But in the old days, they used to like to hear themselves on the radio. They sort of were into it. They were sort of junkies. They enjoyed the participation. Maybe they would fax a radio station now and then. I don't know, Kent. But at this point, no one does that anymore because they can just go get a bunch of likes and notifications on their Facebook page or their Instagram. So that's where they get that itch scratched. They don't need the radio for that anymore. So what has happened is radio has found a huge drop off in engagement on the phone. And so they have services now where actors will come on and pretend to be, exactly what you want them to be. Like, this is Lorna in Vancouver, and she says her boyfriend's been cheating on her. Lorna, what's going on? And then the actress playing Lorna goes, I don't know. He's been acting funny. He hasn't been coming home at night, and he even smells different. I don't know what's going on. All right, we're going to call your boyfriend and pose as a flower company and tell him that he's won some free flowers. And we're going to ask him who he wants those flowers delivered to. And if he delivers them to you, then I guess he's okay. But if he suggests that we send him to somebody else, then I guess we busted him. Now, there's no way on God's green earth that you can do that legally. You can't call somebody out of the blue and put them on the radio without their knowledge because it's against federal law. So they've had to circumvent that by creating this whole construct with War of the Roses and Second Date Update and phone taps and all these prank phone calls, which are all staged. And I think at the end of the day, people go, oh, that's crazy. I didn't know that. But then they don't care because it's like a reality show. I mean, that the real world was anything but, and any reality show that, has arisen in that wake, none of it's real, but we just like the entertainment value. So I don't think it really destroys the experience for people, but it might change it slightly, but not to the point where they're not going to still listen.
It just makes me wonder, what will become of the Maury Poviches of the world if these things are all fake. It just crushes my soul. I really want people to listen in and fool each other and whose daddy is it, whose mommy is it, whose baby is it. Anyway, but so you've been in radio a long time. You've moved to video. You've dabbled in podcasting. You've had a lot of the observations. You can listen to our podcast, Coffee for Closers, or you can listen to, we did I thought it was pretty good recording with Mikel Perman, Craving the Future of Advertising and Marketing. Some good riffing happening there. But, what is your take on where are things going? Part one would be radio. Part two would really be the other media channels you think are most important moving forward. But tell me where you mentioned some things radio's done wrong. Is there anything they're doing right enough that will carry them, or are there things you think they should do to stay relevant in the future?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to dwell too much on radio because I don't think I think that kind of makes the point for us, which is I don't know that radio is really that relevant anymore, and I think that's the sad truth. And I think the reason for that is because of one major mistake they've made, which was back to what I told you about Lee Abrams being in the car and hearing the radio get turned down when the music ended and the DJ started talking. I think radio bet on the wrong pony. I think radio always bet on music. Like they were going to somehow be the gatekeeper for music forever and with commercials. And obviously that didn't happen. Napster showed up and then now we're streaming. I mean, I can get any song I want, anytime I want, anywhere I want. So what does radio offer that's non-duplicatable? What kind of an experience? I mean, there's the local component. They can do that. But again, all of it comes with a pretty heavy freight of commercials. I mean, we're talking about 20 minutes of commercials per hour. I mean, if you were watching content online or anywhere else, there's no way you would sit still for that. And I don't know why radio expects people to do that now. It's just because they've been doing it for so long. But I think that what they didn't really bet on was grooming and growing personalities and grooming and growing stars. I mean, all of these people that you're seeing emerge on YouTube and on Instagram and on TikTok, all of the great content, the creativity that's there, the personality-driven stuff, that's all stuff radio could have been doing this whole time, but didn't do because they just thought, nope, our safest bet, our quickest buck is going to be on playing 10 in a row. And that was taken away from them. The currency was taken away from them, and now they're left with nothing, and they're scrambling. I mean, a lot of radio companies are trying to become digital companies, like what you guys do, only you guys are experts at it and have been doing it right for so long. Now radio's coming along and trying to be like, hey, we're this turnkey package for you. We can put you on the radio, and we can support that media mix with a great digital platform that we now do. But I'm sure in your business you know this, but among some of us in radio, if anybody comes to you from a radio company and wants to do a digital, campaign for you, it's just a radio company trying to do digital, and they can't. My point is they're just way behind and have been. And I think that if they had been a little more innovative and a little more forethought in their thinking, they would have groomed more personalities. They would have changed the model as we went to sort of stay in line with the times in terms of commercial loads, personality development, and where music deployment and acquisition was coming from and how people were using media.
Let's only one more observation about radio, and we'll move on to more relevant channels. I always thought it was interesting when they came out with HD radio. We were talking about this earlier, the idea of taking a visual metaphor and stapling it on and stretching it on to the radio metaphor of airwaves. It harkens back to the Onion that had a piece about these new HD books in high definition that are just widescreen formatted books. It's that kind of genius that radio brings us. So I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts on that observation or the HD thing. Did it way miss? Was it just a goofy name, but it's a great idea to have squeeze more channels out of the digital airwaves?
Yeah, but it's more channels that can't be monetized. It's really can't. All it is when the FCC made it mandatory that TV and radio get away from analog and make their signals digital. That made it possible for, because bandwidth is kind of at a premium. So there's a spectrum for FM, and that includes TV, because TV is basically FM radio. But there are all these little channels in between the frequencies, like our frequency is 103.3. So there's a range of frequencies, sub-frequencies that exist until the next major frequency. And those belong to the carrier, the person that holds 103.3, or the company. And so they wanted to find some way to put content on there. So they just basically automated it and said, okay, well, we're going to put a blues channel on there. We're going to put a old country channel on there. But, no one's listening to that. And certainly no one's buying that. So I don't really think it's a thing. And then they called it HD radio because it's digital. So there was less hiss, there was less static, because with digital, you're basically signing a binary code or a 1 or a 0 to only the content you want. And then that removes the static and the hiss from the analog signal that you never did want. So that's why they called it HD, because it supposedly sounded better.
I can totally see that. So, Mike, switching gears a little bit, tell us about the acting side of things. Was it a childhood dream? Was it later in life? And then I want to ask about your Portlandia experience specifically, but just acting, where does that fit into your life?
Into my life? Well, I used to do a lot of acting, did a lot of commercials. When I was younger, I kind of had a look that I think a lot of people went for, because it was like this just everyday sort of look. So I got cast in a lot of commercials, not so much because I was like so talented or so great, but I just had this look that seemed to fit whatever they were doing. But along the way, I just started paying attention to how they made commercials and how they shot them, how they set them up. But I also did like to perform comedy, and I like to do a lot of improv and just spontaneous stuff like that. That's part of the reason why I liked radio, because back in the old days, you could do a lot of that, and it was fun. Back when you were listening, like we'd call just off the cuff, we would call a 900 phone, like a sex operator. And the producer I had of the show his name was Pete, and he did a really awesome Jabba the Hutt impression, like, oh, gosh, like he sounded exactly like Jabba the Hutt. So the idea was that Jabba the Hutt was calling a phone sex operator, and then C-3PO, who was me, the great and mighty Jabba, whatever, he would translate like he did in the movie for the phone sex operator between Jabba the Hutt and the phone sex operator. So they would have these conversations back and forth. And it's a little risky, maybe it's a little sexist. It was back in the day. But that kind of stuff happening. Like one time I called a whoopee cushion company just live on the air, and I had no idea this was going to go. And she's like, hello. And I said, yes, I'm looking for a particular whoopee cushion, and I wonder if you can help me. And she says, well, what kind are you looking for? And I said, I'm looking for the kind that goes, but not so much the kind that goes. And she starts laughing, and she goes, well, we just had one up here the other day. It was one of those remote controlled whoopee cushions. And I go, oh, a remote control. Cheryl, can you tell me exactly how it sounded? And the idea was to get her to do the noise, right? And she did. And she goes, well, I think it sounded more like, and a little bit less like, and I go, oh, okay. Can you do it again? So I got her to do it multiple times. And, she's basically taking me through the whole sales process of how to buy a whoopee cushion. And it's all based on noise. But the point is that it happened live on the radio. Like I just called the number. And so that's like a 1 in a million chance that you're going to get somebody who's willing to play along, that they're even going to answer the phone, and that she's not going to say the F word, whatever. And that kind of, there's nothing more thrilling than that. That is really fun. So I really enjoyed that aspect of it. And I think when I got into Portlandia, the only reason I got on there was because I was at tennis camp in California, and a producer friend of mine that was on the show, this is when it was getting started, he called me up and says, hey, you got to audition for this show. And I said, okay, I'm not in town. He goes, well, you got to get back to town. I said, well, I can't. He says, well, hold till Monday. So I go on there on Monday, and Alice Matthias, who is now the producer of, documentary now, she's gone on to great things. She was just running camera at the time, and they just gave me a scenario, and I just read into the camera whatever was in my head. And I got the part because of that, just because of my spontaneity. And when I did my first scene on Portlandia, they did give you a script, but as I was doing the lines, as I memorized them, Fred Armisen came over and he goes, no. You don't have to do the lines. The lines are shit. Just do what you were hired to do. Do what you did on that tape. And then I was in, dozens of other episodes over the next 8 years. And that's exactly how we did it. Like we never, ever read the script, ever. And I got a really good compliment from one of the directors or one of the editors, I should say, who went on to become a director. But at a party a few years later, he goes, hey, we really like editing your stuff because you're really naturally funny. And that makes our job so much easier because it gives us more to edit, because we don't follow the lines. We have more material that we can kind of put here and put here and here. And if you don't have actually funny people doing things and doing something different every take, then we don't have much to work with. And so I thought that was a pretty nice compliment. And that was back to what I said about being on the radio or doing that. That kind of spontaneity is really fun.
So are Fred and Carrie, were they fun to work with?
Yeah, they're so great. It was funny on that show because there were a lot of repeat offenders like myself and this actress named Jamie Langton and a couple of other people that were in like all the seasons. And at the end of during the last season, Carrie came over and we were talking, and she said, hey, I just want to let you know that we wrote specific episodes just so you guys would be in them, because we knew what you had done in the previous seasons, and we just had to have you back. There was something about that show that they really liked having that continuity and that consistency. And once you were inside, once you found your way in there, you really had to work hard to screw it up. It was a pretty good time.
That's awesome. Back to your radio career, because I know most about that, but what was your, what do you think was the best bit you ever did that you haven't already told us? Just because I can't get enough of that, but we'll just do like one more of those.
Okay. Okay. This is kind of a crazy story. This has nothing to do with what we're talking about, but okay, I'll tell you. So there used to be this guy named Dave Van Damme, who later went on to become Evil Dave on the Howard Stern show. He's a guy that lived in Illinois, and he was dumb as a box of rocks. He was so dumb, but he could sound exactly like David Letterman. It was like the best impression of a celebrity I've ever heard in my life. And he used to call up radio stations all the time and make like $10 a hit doing these really dumb, shitty top 5 lists. Hey, top 5 reasons your cat hates you, that kind of stuff. And most of the radio stations used him in that context. I myself found it fascinating that this guy existed in the world, that this guy sounded so much like David Letterman. I thought it was more interesting to interview him and find out more about what he does and how this worked, because it was such a unique story. And so then we started getting the idea that this guy sounds so much like David Letterman. I wonder what it would be like if we called the production office of Seinfeld and just say, hey, Dave's on the phone and he wants to see if Jerry's available. 5 seconds later, Jerry Seinfeld's on the phone having what he thinks is a conversation with David Letterman. And we're just sitting back listening to the whole thing. And you know, looking back, it's kind of an unethical, it's a very unethical thing to do. But God, it was fascinating. And did it with Shandling, the cast of Friends, Roseanne, and it worked like a charm every time. So now that we had this sort of magic thing that we were doing, it was really fun. Norm Macdonald started doing his David Letterman impression on Saturday Night Live when he was doing Weekend Update on that show. And so, of course, we have to have Dave Van Dam call up Norm and be all pissed off as David Letterman. How could you do this impression of us, Norm? I thought we were friends, Norm. What's going on? Norm completely fell for it. Like, not only did he pick up the phone right away, he was like, "Oh my God, you thought that was bad? Oh my God, I thought that was just without comment. Oh no." And I felt so bad. I finally said, "Hey, Norm, this is just a radio show in Portland, Oregon, and this guy is not David Letterman. Dave, talk in your normal voice." And Van Dam, being the dumb guy that he was, couldn't talk in his normal voice. Anything sounded like David Letterman. And so Norm goes, No, that's fucking Letterman, man. There's no way, you know? And I said, "No, I swear to God." He goes, "Well, send me the tape." So we sent him the tape. And about 3 months later, Norm comes to Portland to do some stand-up at downtown at the Schnitzer. And so some guy from Double T, the promoter, called me up and said, "Hey, do you want to introduce Norm Macdonald at the Schnitzer?" And I said, "Sure." So I get up there and I get backstage, and Norm's back there. And I say, "Hey, Norm." He goes, Hey. I said, "I'm that guy that just called you a couple months ago with that Dave Letterman thing." He turns to go, "Oh my God, that was you?" And I'm like, "Yeah." He goes, "Thanks for sending me that tape. We've been sitting around listening to this tape. We love that tape." And I'm saying, "Oh, cool. Yeah. And so we kind of struck up a little rapport, a little conversation. And right before I'm about ready to go out and do the introduction, which is typically just, "Hey, I'm Mike, the radio boy, and Norm Macdonald's here. Who's excited? Yay, here he is, Norm Macdonald." We're going out there, and he goes, "Hey, why don't you get out there and do some jokes? Why don't you get out there, you know, take a couple minutes and do some jokes?" And I happen to have some jokes because I liked writing one-liners and stuff for the radio show. So that morning I had some fresh jokes. So I get on stage, and the place is packed with a bunch of frat boys that are just waiting for Norm to come out and talk about how much Joe Camel looks like a penis. You know, that's like his whole act at that time. And they're just hooting and hollering and screaming. And I'm just like, I'm dying. I am so nervous. I've never done stand-up in my life. So I get out there and I told a few jokes, and didn't do too badly by all accounts. After it was over, my friends who were on the audience said, "Yeah, you didn't suck. It was okay." And even Norm at the end, he goes, "Hey, that was pretty good. You told some jokes. I like that OJ joke you told," because I told an OJ joke. And at that point, I thought, you know, I could just not be in radio anymore, and this would be fine. This would be a great day. There's really nothing that's going to be better than this. And when he died the other day, I had met him subsequent to that. Like we hooked up a few times after that. I'm not normally bothered by celebrities dying because I don't really know them. It's sad, but that one really hit me in the gut because that was a really fun night, and that whole experience was so great because of radio.
Thanks for sharing that. I saw your tweets about Norm passing. In fact, you're who I found out from. Normally, I might find out through a television or a radio, right? But I saw your tweets, and I was like, "What?" And then I looked it up. I was like, "Wow!" And then, you know, all the comedic greats talked about. It's funny. I don't think anybody gave him that much kudos while he was alive, and suddenly he was like a legend. It was really interesting. I think how people memorialize certain people, but you know, he was. I think his Weekend Update, you know, broke ground and eventually got him fired, but it really made him. I am going to see if anybody on the team has any questions, but I'm going to give them time to think about it, and maybe you guys use the chat. But I just want to ask you, on the TV side, on the acting side, is there any one story that stands out as like just a horrifically embarrassing, amazingly hilarious, serendipitous, something on the, you know, whether it was at a commercial shoot or Portlandia or something else that you think that your audience would want to know?
Nothing really too crazy. I was making a video in North Carolina because I lived in North Carolina for a while, and there's a legendary basketball coach. I'm not a big sports fan, but apparently he's of some note. His name is Coach K. Anyone ever heard of Coach K? I believe he coaches basketball, or did, at a school called Duke University, I think. And so I was involved in this whole thing for Duke Children's Hospital because
didn't he coach at the Olympics too?
I think he might have. Yeah. No, I'm telling you, people know who this guy is. And I was the host of this thing for Duke's Children's, or for the Children's Hospital and for Dornbecker, because there was a joint effort between the two to raise money for children and cancer research. And so while I was talking to Coach K, we had a live feed set up, and I said, "Hey, I'm here with Coach K, legendary basketball coach for the UNC Tar Heels." And I mean, everybody, which is their rival, which everybody in the room, I think shit their pants. I think everybody shit in their pants a little bit, because it was so blasphemous to say what I said. And he, because he can afford to be magnanimous because he's a legend, was so great. He put his arm on my shoulder. He goes, "I've always wanted to see what it'd be like to coach from the other side." It's an interesting theory that you bring up right there. Let's explore that. He made a joke out of it, and he saved my ass, but I was so embarrassed, so humiliated, and I had to keep going.
Wow. I'm glad you told us a humbling story. Probably few and far between, but a good one. So did you get his autograph? Did he sign with the other coach's name? That would have been the right move.
Yeah, whoever that guy was. I don't know that I got an autograph, but we had dinner afterward and some pictures and stuff. And he was just a really nice man, super nice guy. Just
That's
retired,
awesome.
right? Mike, didn't he just retire?
Yeah, he did. His assistant will be coaching this year.
Okay.
So
Well, I
I'm
look forward.
getting
I
on
look
the
forward.
hearing there. Yeah,
I look
go
forward to
ahead,
getting
please.
his assistant's name wrong someday in the future. That'll be fun too.
At least he didn't try and pronounce his name, Kaczynski or whatever.
Krzyzewski, Mike Krzyzewski. Yeah.
Well done. Well
With
done.
a K, of course.
Well, Mike, we're at the magic 40-ish minute mark where
Okay.
typically it's not because that we're not on Zoom, so it's not timing out. It's just that we know that 40% of people check out at the 41-minute mark. So we want to keep full engagement. Is there anything you would want, any parting wisdom or knowledge you'd want to give to our listeners that are going to be listening from all over the world by the millions?
Yeah.
What do
No,
you
I
want-
just want to say that obviously I'm more of a creative animal, and you guys are really good with the math on this, the science, the programmatic side of it, the digital side. But I think what you guys do is so essential, especially because of how bad broadcast has been for so many years when it comes to attribution and ROI and figuring out a way to get the right message in front of the right audience. And so as a person who wants to have the most impact with whatever creative endeavor I come up with, I think it's very reassuring to have in my mind and in my sort of the back of my mind when I'm doing things, to know that it's going to be deployed to the right place at the right time with the right people for the maximum optimized event. And I think that what you guys do is very important, and I really appreciate it a lot. I can't do it, but I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Mike. I do have one quick question for the listeners. It came from our Anvil team. What roles or characters did you play on Portlandia, so we can all Google and catch up on it?
In the first season, there was that dog that was tied to the pole, and they let the dog go because they thought, who ties their dog to a pole like a stripper? And so then the dad and the little girl come back. What did you do to our dog? Have you seen our dog? Yeah, we saw your dog. We had to let it go because you tied it to a pole like a stripper. We were just gone for a few minutes just to get a cookie. Daddy, where's Tucker? I don't know, honey. I was the dad, and so I had this ongoing interaction with both of them as they tried to shame me for tying the dog to the pole like a stripper. Only when they left to go get their son, he was tied to a pole in one of those child harnesses, and they picked him up and took him away. So, and then throughout the season, like so much stuff. I was in the outlet hotel. I was the guy there. I was the real estate guy for the loft that they wanted to rent. I was I was the car wash guy with the two women that ran the bookstore.
The bookstore, yeah.
Feminist bookstore, yeah. So they had a car wash because they were low on money, so they washed my car, and that was a pretty good one. Kyle MacLachlan as the mayor of Portland, he and I had some scenes with regard to the marathon, and he wanted the marathon route to make a big rose shape for the Rose City, and all this wheeling dealing had to go on, well, I'll let you go through that street if you tear down those ugly condos or whatever. So there was a lot of stuff in and around that whole bit. There was the brunch one. I was in that. I mean, I was in a lot of them, so it's hard for me to recount them. It's been a while since I was in that show. So I just go through and watch it. Even if I'm not in it, it's still pretty good.
Well, yeah, thanks for the plug. It has been a while, and I know that, I mean, they made Portland more than they broke it, and I think we're grateful for them. And Fred and Kay are pretty damn impressive people, as are you, Mike, and we appreciate your time. Where can we find you? You mentioned 103, but Milepost Media is your other job, your main gig?
Yeah,
Tell us
it's a
about
company
that.
I have. I just do creative branding video mainly. I mean, we do a lot of nuts and bolts, ham and egg kind of video too, like company stories and even some transactional stuff. But mainly it's branding. We try to find some creative spin on things, and so that's at milepostmedia.com. So if you have any clients or people or folks that that might want to talk about sort of interesting or different or offbeat video, we kind of specialize in the offbeat. Hit me up, let me know. And if there's anything that I can do for you guys, just let me know. I'm happy to help out. We're all kind of collabing here, and it's been a real pleasure to be on the show. Kent, thanks for asking me. I appreciate what you guys do at Anvil, as I said, and it's nice to be associated. So thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you as well. And we may need to follow back up with that Dave Letterman guy. I mean, he may be retired, either one or both of them, but man, it'd be cool to bring him back in the loop and get him some more airplane prank call people.
He is retired in the sense that he's actually dead.
Yeah, I was gonna say he's probably not around anymore.
Yeah.
Wow.
But what a legacy of fake David Letterman content he left in his wake. So there's that.
That's awesome. Well, thanks so much, Mike, and thanks Anvil team for listening in and sharing your questions. And we'll be back at another time, another place. We're just figuring this stuff out. But thank you, Mike, for being our first inaugural guest of this brown bag virtual lunch and learn thingamajig. Thanks for your time, everybody. Catch us at anvilmedia.com. Follow us on the Twitters and everywhere else you might, even the TikToks. We're on the TikToks too, dancing and so forth. So anyway, thanks everybody for your time. We'll catch you on the next one.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.